Hey there, everyone. I believe we are live. Let me double check. So I know the one time I don't check will be the one time that we don't go live. And it looks like, yes, there is my smiling face. So, hey there, I am Jason Logston, and this is Makin Bacon. We're all about helping you serve your fans, grow your income, and get the most out of your blog. Today's episode is sponsored by the 5 Essentials of a Successful Self-Published Cookbook. It's a webinar that my friend Lori Rice and I hosted yesterday. There's a free live training for bloggers who want to make their dream of self-publishing their own cookbook a reality. The session focused on teaching you what you need to know to self-publish your book from start to finish, including coming up with a complete photography plan to make sure that you account for everything you need to photograph. I failed to do that on a few of mine, so it was great learning from Lori. You can access that at makethatbacon.com/publish. And at the end of that training, Lori and I also offer a huge discount on our self-publishing courses that several people took advantage of already. So if you're ready to take that next step, start publishing your cookbook, go ahead and check it out at makethatbacon.com/publish. And remember, you can join us live every Thursday when we record these episodes. You can ask the guest questions, talk to the other bloggers in the comments, and even see our smiling faces, which you can't on the podcast. So join us Thursdays live at makethatbacon.com/live. And if you're listening, say hi in the comments. Let us know what your blog is. And if questions come up during the episode, let us know, and I will pass them along. So on to the show. As bloggers, we sometimes fall into the rut of hiding behind our blogs. We just publish recipes and post them to social media, but we don't get out there in front of our fans. There's many ways to get out there, from cooking classes to Facebook Lives, Instagram Reels, and a lot of different methods that you can use. But one of the most effective ways is to get in front of a new audience is by going on local television. Just thinking about that, though, can be terrifying for many of us. I can't imagine live TV, but today's guest is a perfect person to help us get over those fears and learn how to get on local television. She founded Feed Your Family Tonight to help busy families eat dinner together and recapture a little calm in the crazy, something we all can use these days. She's a cookbook author and a podcaster, but her first love is food TV. As a weekly guest on her local ABC affiliate, she knows what it takes to be a stellar guest. She helps chefs and food bloggers connect with their local TV stations and learn how to cook on television. She is a cookbook author, podcaster, and the weekly segment. I think I just reread that. She has done so many things. I just get confused trying to keep track of all of them. And she knows how hard it is to get dinner on the table, whether you're working until 6, running kids to after-school activities, or chasing toddlers all day. She has dealt with picky eaters, food allergies, and busy schedules, but still manages to feed her family a home-cooked meal almost every night. She wants to help others do the same. I can't wait to learn from today's guest, Marie Fiebach, founder of Feed Your Family Tonight. Welcome to Makin Bacon.
It's a joy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate you coming on. We have a few people saying hi in the comments. We got Marielle from Global Kitchen Travels. Welcome. We have Megan Leal from cookingoncaffeine.com. We have my mother, Barbara Logston, Amelia, monitoring in the comments, making sure people stay in line over there. So thank you for joining us, everyone. So I can't wait to dive into cooking on local TV. But before we get started, I always like to ask, what is it like around your dinner table on a typical day?
Well, I have 4 teenagers. My twins are 13 years old. They just turned 13 in October. And so I have a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, and 13-year-old twins. And my dinner table can be a little hectic, especially because they're all very active. I have kids that are in theater. I have kids that do sports, and I have kids that do dance and singing and all of these things. And so we often have dinner in shifts where I've got one kid that's coming from one practice, we're eating in between, another kid's having an early plate or a late plate. So our dinner table is varied every night. We don't eat dinner at the same time every night. That is like the dream for me, to always have dinner at the same time. But my main thing is teaching people how to meal plan. And I teach people that you have to plan around your life, not have your meal plan dictate your life. And so my dinner table is a little crazy, but I love it. My husband and my 4 kids, when we try and sit down together almost every night, oftentimes there's one kid that's drifting in and out, but it's just a typical American household. I'm in the middle of Kansas. It's heartland meat and potatoes, and that's what my dinner table looks like.
So when you talk about working on crazy schedules and picky eaters, you definitely know from your own expertise what you're talking about.
Oh my goodness, I've lived it all. I've lived food allergies, I've lived picky eaters, and I might not say that my husband's the pickiest of them all, but that's sometimes how it is.
Didn't hear it from you,
No.
Your message is all about making family dinners work for you. And I'm sure none of the food bloggers listening right now ever have crazy schedules or feel overwhelmed trying to get dinner on the table. But just in case, do you have any tips for the rest of us to how to do that?
The biggest thing that I teach in Feed Your Family Tonight is that a pre-made meal plan is not going to work for every family, because what my family values and what we're going to eat is not the same as what your family values and what they're going to eat. So look at your activities, figure out when you are going to eat before you figure out what you're going to eat. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make in meal planning, is they don't realize that they've got meetings back to back all day, or maybe it's a day where you're recipe testing or photo shooting all day, and you are not going to feel like cooking dinner at the end of the day as a food blogger. Oh my goodness. On days where I am shooting video or recipe testing, I am toast, and I have to have something super, super simple for dinner. So plan your meals around your energy. And then with the activities, another big thing is that when I've got kids that are running from piano to 3:45 to 4:45, soccer 5 to 6, and I've got to be back up at school for a PTO meeting at 7, I have to have something in the oven or the slow cooker that I can pull out at 6:15 the minute we walk in the door from soccer practice. And so, but then 3 or 4 days later, I've got 20 minutes to fix a stir fry that takes a little bit of hands-on at the stove cooking time. So plan your meals around your reality. And then you want to know what the magic is of making sure that you can eat home as much as possible and avoid the drive-through. Yep. It's something called having a backup. I encourage all families, and food bloggers are in this too, is to have something that you can get on the table in 20 minutes or less and keep the ingredients in your house all the time. So when you have a day when the wheels fall off, and we all have days where the wheels fall off.
Never.
Right, then you have something that you can get on the table. It's going to take you 20 minutes to get to the drive-thru and back. Why not just have something simple? A lot of families do breakfast for dinner for that. So they'll make pancakes and scrambled eggs. I do bean and cheese quesadillas. I keep some tortillas in my freezer. I keep a bag of cheese in my freezer, and I have a can of refried beans. It doesn't have to be Pinterest perfect food every night. It's just feeding your family.
That sounds actually really, really tasty right now. And I love your concept of figuring out, what you're doing during the day and planning around that. I know I've had more than one conversation with my wife when, she's like, "Oh, I can't wait to come home. Like, you've been sending me pictures of all this food that you've been making all throughout the day. Like, what are we having?" I'm like, "I don't know. You want to order pizza? Because I don't want to even come anywhere near, a stove, because I've been cooking and recipe testing all day long."
Isn't that the truth, though? I mean, our energy has so much to do with it. And as a food blogger, I think my friends in real life don't realize what recipe testing really is. And they don't realize that it is like my job and my work. And that at the end of the day, I don't want to do it. I do my job for my job. And at the end of the day, I just want my family fed, and I don't want to see another dish.
Yep. Marielle says she always keeps a few frozen backups like pierogies and dumplings. That sounds like a great plan.
Yes. Use that freezer section. Oh my goodness. Frozen raviolis too. And oh my gosh, I haven't had a pierogi in years, but that sounds really good.
I recently did leftovers pot pie with frozen puff pastry, in the freezer, and I had some gravy frozen in there, and just pulled it out with some of the leftover vegetables and meat we had, tossed it in the oven, and 20 minutes later, it was like scrumptious, chicken pot pies, and it was a great backup that didn't take much time at all.
Jason, we literally had that for dinner last night. I had roasted chicken a couple of weeks ago. I had chicken meat in the freezer. I pulled out a bag of frozen vegetables and some chicken broth and put it all in a skillet. And again, nothing like a good box of frozen puff pastry. I mean, that makes everything better. That's exactly what we had for dinner last night.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love I've gotten a lot better at taking what I make during the recipe testing and reusing that as dinner. Like, even if it's just one of the components, but using it in a different way for dinner that's a little more accessible, that I don't have to redo something fancy.
Yeah, I use my leftovers from recipe testing a lot of times for my kids' lunches. I'll have them in single serving in the freezer, and then I can just pull them out and thaw them overnight and put them in my kids' lunchbox the next day. I do that a lot too.
That's great. And I'm excited to dive into live TV. But first, I want to give a
Yeah.
plug to Madison Wetherill. She's hosting the upcoming Food Blogger Summit. It kicks off next week on the 26th. I think my presentation on moving beyond the ad network is actually the first presentation in the summit. So no pressure at all, just setting the tone for for everything that's
Yeah.
coming. And then the two of us are both going to be on a podcasting panel, I believe, on the 28th, right?
Yes, I'm excited for that.
And then you are speaking about diving into more about cooking on TV on the 29th with your own presentation, right?
That's right. That's right. It's going to be so fun. And that podcast panel is going to be fun because I'm one of the few people that has a podcast for consumers. Most of the people on the panel have podcasts for food bloggers, and I actually have a podcast for consumers. So that's going to be fun.
I'm really curious today, after we talk about TV, I want to talk about podcasting some, because I am always curious about how, a podcast like this one makes a lot of sense to me because it's about business. So I'm really curious to talk about how it works for consumers and some of what you've discovered in that vein. So that could be really cool. And there's some other amazing speakers coming up. We have Elizabeth Valsigno is going to be there, Megan Porta, Jenny Melrose, Sally Eckes, Lori Rice, Christina Peters, or just a few of the ones that I know and who always do a great job. And you can sign up for that at makethatbacon.com/food summit. And it takes you right there. I think the conference is free and they have a all access pass with something like $3,000 worth of bonus giveaways in it for like $50 or $75. So it's definitely worth checking out if you want to learn a lot about blogging. So your show, you are a weekly guest on your local ABC affiliate. I want to know more about what does that mean and what do you do on your show?
What it means is that it's a little different now during pandemic. So let me tell you what it means in normal times, and then we'll talk about how I have adapted to the pandemic. In normal times, I take everything to the food station. For years, I was at a 6:45 in the morning slot. And then they have moved me to a later morning slot. But I take all of my ingredients, all of my cooking utensils. There is no water on set. So I am taking water to wash my hands. I'm taking things to clean up after myself. Take everything to the food station. And luckily, I have access to a door that goes straight into the studio. I set up. I do a 5 to 7 minute cooking segment where I am teaching a recipe, and the anchors are asking me questions and they're tasting the recipe at the end. And then they talk about me and they send people to my Facebook group. They send people to buy my cookbook. They give that back. I do not pay for this. I get all the free advertising that I want. I don't have to pay for it. And I do this 5 times a month. So I do a 9 a.m. segment right now, every Monday. And then the first Monday of the month, I do an 11 a.m. segment as well. And so that's what it's like in normal times. In the pandemic, the station is not having any in-studio guests. And so I do kind of a combination of things. I usually send in a tape, which is in that 3 to 5 minute range, where I do a recipe, I cook it from home, I video it on my iPhone. Like, it's not high production quality, but they are thrilled to have it. And that's something I want to let you know, is that you don't have to be as a studio producer and have studio equipment for this to work for you. I film it on my iPhone, I send it in, and they post it during their 9 a.m. show. And then once a month, I actually get on Skype and I cook live with the anchor. And they are at the cooking set in the studio and they have their ingredients and they make the recipe, and I'm making the recipe in my home and we're doing it live together. There's about a 1.5 second delay, and you get used to that. And it is so much fun, but way, way, way more work, because you have to have a recipe that can be done start to finish in 7 minutes. Now you think about that. And you also have to have ingredients that aren't wonky, aren't expensive, aren't hard to find. And that's why I only do it once a month. My producer would love it if I did it all the time. But like this Monday, I'm doing a beer bread. Well, you can't bake a beer bread in 7 minutes. You can mix it up, but you can't bake it. And then the anchor has to go back and do the rest of their work. And the beer bread's in the oven, they're burning. There's just lots of logistic things that you have to think about when you're doing something live with someone else in a 7-minute time slot.
That sounds really fun and really terrifying. And I can't imagine trying to teach someone over Skype in a limited time window like that when they're doing it live. Like that sounds, I've helped enough people cook that I understand how many issues can come up when you're trying to do something that you're pretty sure works and a stranger is doing it, that it doesn't always go as smoothly as you hoped.
Well, I've had bloopers. I was making no-bake cookies with, and again, these anchors I've known for years now. So they're personal friends. I know them well. And I was doing no-bake cookies with one of the anchors, and I said, bring a medium saucepan. Well, he brought like a 6-inch skillet. And so he's like trying, and what's fun is though, the viewers ate it up because I was totally making fun of him. He's very self-deprecating. He totally took it. He managed to find a way to make it work by getting a bowl, and he mixed things separately. And the rapport that we had is something that the viewers like. That's one thing. If you're ever doing TV, the anchors are there to make you look good. Get to know them. Don't be afraid to banter with them. They're going to ask you questions, and you want to build a rapport with them because they want to make you look good, because then they look good too.
And I don't know a ton about TV, but I would assume that a lot of people tune into these shows for the anchors and feel a connection with the anchors. So watching them interact with someone, I feel like would make them be like the segments even more, and the anchors would enjoy that.
Absolutely, because you do. And it's a really interesting feeling because you are very intimate with them. They are seeing your face and they're talking to you, and they see you every day. And especially in a 9 a.m. morning show, there's a lot of banter, and you're sending in a little bit of your personal life. So one of my anchors just got married, and so she posted a few pictures of her wedding and talked about that. Another of the anchors is his wife is having a baby, and they shared that. And so you are very intimate with them. And so when you go out into the world and people see you, they feel like they know you. And even with just a weekly segment, one time I was in a store and I was talking to my daughter, and this gal in line in front of me flipped around and she goes, "You're the food lady," because she heard my voice. And she knew it because she'd been seeing it week after week. So that does happen. But it's kind of fun. My children roll their eyes at me and they make fun of me as the food lady, but they do. It's a very intimate relationship with your viewer. It definitely, one of the best things it does is it builds incredible social proof, and it improves your visibility. And my segments, I post on my Instagram, I post on my YouTube page, I post on my Facebook page. And so you have one piece of content that stretches, and that's we might talk about it later, but this is one thing that if any of your viewers do get into doing TV on a local station, ask for the MP4. And that is the video of your segment. They will send it to you. They should send it to you for free. I did a PBS station one time, and I had to pay like $25 to get it. But for me, that was worth every penny. But they should send, because it's branded with their stuff. They're going to have the station across the bottom, and they're going to have all of their branding on it. And that gets their brand out more too. So do not be afraid to ask them for the MP4. You want it to build your resume, and you want it to recycle that content 100 different ways.
That's great. I didn't realize that if you did local TV like that, that you can actually get the copy of the video and use it in all your social media. Because that would be, like you're saying, a great way to for a social proof of showing that you are an expert in your field, and just moving forward in front of your fans' eyes that you do know what you're talking about. There's a reason they should be following your website. Being on local TV is
That's right.
a pretty good one.
Well, because again, if the television station has vetted you and they're willing to have you on, then that means you know what you're talking about. In the eye of a viewer. I mean, we all know that it's fake it till you make it sometimes, but for sure, it gives you so much social proof, and it extends beyond just your local community. Because when you put it on your social media, they're saying, oh, well, she's on her local TV station. So it definitely helps in your local community, but it extends way, way beyond that.
How have you, speaking of local communities, how have you found that what market you're in changes it? Like I'm in New York City. So like, how does that affect being able to get on places, when it's a top media market in the country versus Kansas or other places?
That can be a challenge. If you're in New York, LA, Chicago, Denver a little bit, larger markets are much harder to break into. But I do have a little help. If you're in a larger market, that also means that there are smaller cable news stations. And so you may not be on your ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, but you can get on little cable stations and they're thrilled to have you. So don't think just because you're in New York that there isn't a chance. I have a friend who's in Boston and they're on a little cable station in Boston. And again, in the reality of it, it really doesn't matter what the station is, because the value is when you put it out on your social and you put it on your website. You are going to get some viewers and some followers from the live things that are happening, but the value is in the bigger use of the content. So if you're in a place like New York, you're going to be looking for small cable stations.
That makes a lot of sense. Muriel says she is in New York too, so
Yeah.
maybe I'll see her shortly on some local stations.
Yeah.
And so, when you talk about using this content as well to further your brand, is that something that you can rely on if you're going after like sponsored posts or trying to work with brands? That you can point to this as one more reason that they should be working with you as opposed to another blogger?
Absolutely. And depending upon the station that you're working with, it has to be all above board. But there is possibilities for doing partnerships. So if you are using a brand of flour and that person is willing to pay the station and pay you, you can get a little bit of a cut for using that brand of flour on TV. It takes a lot more work than just doing branded content on your website, but it is possible, and there are opportunities out there for doing branded content. I personally have not done it yet, but there's a gal at our station who's sponsored by Sara Lee. There's another gal at our station who works for the Kansas Soybean Council. And she comes in as part of her job and makes a recipe that uses soybeans in one way or another. So there are possibilities out there to even get paid and use sponsorship. Now I have, and my station doesn't care if I don't get paid, but like I have a friend who's a carpenter who makes beautiful cutting boards. I pitch him. As long as I am not personally getting paid for it, my station doesn't care. But you have to be really clear with your station and let them know that you're doing it, and let them know that you are not getting paid, or if you are getting paid, then they are going to expect a cut.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's more if you're like a chef ambassador type thing, for a large brand, it's something that you could probably work into your stuff. But if you have things that you personally believe in and you're not getting compensated for, you can talk about those. And can you also pitch your
Absolutely.
own products as well?
Totally. And that is a huge part of my business strategy. That is how I have sold my self-published cookbook. Every time I have my self-published cookbook, my self-published meal planning notebook, and we always talk about that. That is how I get my sales for that. My holiday planning guide is coming up, and actually I'm shooting videos this afternoon after our call, and I will be pitching my holiday planning guide for the next 6 weeks. And totally on the up and up. the thing is, when they have guests on, they expect to be talking about advertising and pitching something. They have the little boutique that's on and they're talking about their clothing. And they have the animal shelter that's on and they're talking about the fundraising that they're doing to keep the animal shelter. And they have the children's theater on and they're talking about their shows that are coming up. How they fill their time in the mornings is with people pitching their stuff. And sometimes it's pay to play. And we can talk about that, Jason, because it's a pitfall that I really want the bloggers to know about. Sometimes it's pay to play, and sometimes it's like what I have, where I just come in and they're thrilled to have me because they have time to fill. These stations have 4 to 5 hours to fill every morning. So that's 25 to 30 hours a week, especially if you're looking at the weekends. There's not usually quite as many hours on the weekends, but they have hours and hours and hours to fill every day with fresh content. The viewers love food. When I first started at my station, my producer said, we had a gal on who was here from a couple of years and then she just vanished, and we still have people calling and asking for her recipes 5 years later. The viewers love food content, and the TV stations need you. Now, I mentioned pay to play, and I really want to talk about this a bit. Some stations, especially in larger markets, I had a client that I was private coaching, and she ran into this in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where the station required you to pay for your spots as an advertisement. And in my market in Wichita, there's one station that is pay to play and the other ones aren't pay to play. So it kind of depends. If you run into that, there's a couple of things. The first thing is you may just walk away and find another station. But remember that the value is in the social proof, and the cost of a Sunday morning segment is a fraction of the cost of a Monday morning at 6:45 a.m. segment. And so it might be worth, and some are thousands of dollars and some are hundreds of dollars. It's really a matter of just talking with the advertising people at the station, but it might be worth a couple $100 for you to do one segment and get it out there saying that you've been on your local TV news. So even if you run into pay to play, it isn't necessarily run like the wind. You need to look at the value and the cost for you, and the time that it is on makes a big difference. But as a food blogger, it really doesn't matter if it's on a Sunday morning or if it's on a Monday morning, because the value is in putting it on your social. So look for an inexpensive slot. It might be worth it to you.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not the type of thing you'd want to do on a weekly basis necessarily,
No.
but the type of thing you could do now and again to continue to build up that resume and use it almost like a marketing expense to put that content together.
Well, the other thing is I use it to get videos for all my recipes. You know, Google is liking video more and more. That's becoming a more important part of getting search engine optimization. And so all of my recipe videos are just straight from my TV. And Google doesn't know that it's not like a shot-by-shot recipe. They just know that it's a video of the recipe, and that works. So if you have a recipe that you really want video for and you don't want to produce the video yourself, it might be worth, or you were going to pay someone to produce a video anyway, might be worth just going on local TV, paying a little. Or even better, find a deal like what I have where it's free and go on and get it. I mean, that's as good as it gets, but I don't want to acknowledge that everybody's going to be in that situation. But it's a way to get video for your recipes.
It's great that there's so many different outcomes that from shooting the segment, you get all the brand recognition, you get some new audience and some new fans from seeing it. You boost your resume. You also have content to put on your blog and put on social media while still looking like more and more of an authority because you were on television, which still has that cachet of being, very exclusive.
Absolutely. And it's easier to get on than you think. And the smaller the market that you are in, the easier it is to get on. So if we have bloggers that are out there in, smaller towns, oh my goodness, it is so easy to get on. And so, yeah, and I talk about that in my Food Blogger Summit. I kind of talk about how to connect with stations and how to get on.
Nice. I definitely want to ask a few questions about that. We have a few comments. Darren Wilson just joined us. He runs speaking of podcasts for cooks, he runs the Firewater podcast, which is all about sous vide and grilling. And I know he's working on a cookbook right now. And then Marielle asked, when we were talking about the sponsors, she says, what about if it's not direct compensation, but you have an affiliate relationship with a company? How do you disclose that, or do you need to?
If you have an affiliate relationship, then you are getting money from it. And it's a good idea to tell your producer that you are an affiliate for that. Each station's going to be different, but you definitely want to keep above board. The last thing you want to do is make someone really upset because they think you're doing something underhanded. So if you are getting compensation in any way and you are mentioning that product on the segment, then you want the television station to know.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. Hopefully you are building a long-term partnership with the television station. You want to make sure you start off on the right foot, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. And again, they're used to you advertising. So if it's something like affiliate, they probably aren't going to care. And so you just want to make sure that everything's above board and be open and honest with them.
So if someone's listening and they say, okay, great, I want to give this a shot. What is the next step? I assume you don't just send out a tweet and say, hey, who wants to put me on TV? How do you go about finding some of these opportunities and connecting with the right people at those stations?
First thing is start with your personal network. Your goal is, and let me kind of talk with you before that. I want to talk with you about the structure of a station so that people know that you have the talent, which are the reporters, the weatherman, the anchors. All of those people are in front of the camera. They're considered the talent. And then you have all of the production people behind. You have the producers who are putting together everything that the talent is reading. They're sending the reporters to the scenes. They are writing the copy. They are picking the videos. They are putting the entire show together. And then you have like the cameramen, who are sometimes called directors. So producer and director, you want to get to the producer because the producer is the person who makes the show happen. But anyone at that station, from the talent to the janitor, can get you to the producer. Anchors, most of their emails are public and they get hundreds of emails a day. But the producer's emails are not usually public and they don't get as many a day. So you want to get to the producer. So start with your personal network. Do you know anyone who knows anyone who is at that station? I got my first break on a PBS station because my high school drama teacher was friends with a gal who was actually doing pay to play. She was paying to produce a show on this PBS station, and she had a local author on. And I was like, well, I wrote a cookbook. I'm a local author. And I sent her a message on Facebook Messenger. 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from her producer. Never talked to her, never saw her. Someone else interviewed me, but that's how I got my first break. My second break that led to my weekly segment, my brother-in-law's best friend was dating the morning anchor. And I said, can you get me talking to Jamel? And 3 weeks of texts back and forth. She texted me on a Monday saying, be here on Friday at 11. We'll do your segment at 11:15. I was like, okay. So anyone who is connected to the station can get you there. If they are a past employee of the station, they can get you the email of the producer, and that's what you want.
Awesome. So rely on your network, get out there and try to get in touch with the producer via any means that you can.
Exactly. And then after you've tapped your network, then start following the talent on social media. Start commenting on your things. The talent gets to know their fans on a personal level. If they are good at what they do, they are noticing that Marie Fiebach comments twice a week on their posts, and she leaves nice, meaningful things and asks meaningful questions. And 2 or 3 weeks of that, go to their DMs and say, hey, you know, we've been connecting. I am a food blogger, and it's Thanksgiving time. It'd be a good time to put a recipe on air. Would you be able to consider me doing a cooking segment, doing a recipe? And more often than not, they'll respond. It's amazing the power of DMs. You want to build the relationship first, but then work into the DMs, and it can get you on TV.
It makes sense. Like, it sounds intimidating to like follow them and comment, but they are in a lot of cases almost similar to us as bloggers, that we have probably thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that consume our content. But if someone is commenting on your posts on Instagram or on Facebook, like, and they do it regularly, you probably know who that fan is. And you at least, if they DM'd you, then you'd recognize them, even though you have 100,000 page views a month on your blog or something like that. And they're probably no different than that.
Absolutely. They are no different than that. And they are just normal people. And it's not intimidating. And the other thing is, once you are in, then you're in. And that's, go in and kill your first segment, do stellar, and they will ask you back because they have 5 hours to fill every morning. Do not ever forget that. They need you. And you think, oh, they're doing me this big favor, but the reality is they desperately need you.
That makes a lot of sense. They have all that time to fill, and they need, especially people, if you're good to work with and you go in with a good attitude, I'm assuming that also goes a long way, that they are the more people that they can work with, that they have a good time with, the happier they're going to be.
Absolutely, because they're just people. You know, that don't be stunned by celebrity. They are just people, and just like you and me, like, we're all pretty average, you know, and they, yeah, and it's so fun to build relationships with them too. And that's one of my favorite parts of what I'm doing. I mean, they're my friends, and it's really exciting.
So you get a hold of the producer. They say, yes, we'd love to have you in. Come in for this time slot. What do you cook? Do you say like, okay, well, I'm going to go big to impress everyone? Do you say I'm going to go simple so things don't explode in my face? What's your approach for someone going in for the first 1 or 2 times?
You wanted a stupid, simple recipe. And when I say stupid, simple, I want the viewer to be able to go into their pantry and make it that afternoon without having to go to the grocery store or look up the recipe. Now, as a food blogger, you're thinking, I want them to come to my site. I want the traffic, right? They'll come to your site. Don't worry about that. They will come. But you want that recipe for them to identify. I tell you, one of my highest performing recipes that I have made was a lemon ramen chicken stir fry. It was ramen noodles and broccoli and chicken and lemon juice. Like, stupid, simple. And that might even be a little evolved for your first thing. I don't recommend using raw meat your first time, because raw meat can be a little things. My first time I did a big batch taco meat, and I had my hamburger pre-cooked, had it in the skillet like it was sizzling there. I made my taco mix, and then I added my taco mix and water to the meat, and then served the taco. There's a 3-part step to a successful segment. You want to have the setup, where you have all of your ingredients and where you do your mixing. You want to have the cooking, where you are mixing, cooking, doing something on the stove. And then you want to have the tasting, where you have a finished product. So you are going to have something completely finished when you come to the studio, because 15 minutes is about the most you're going to have to set up. You don't have a lot of time to set up. And you want to bring some props to make it look pretty, kind of like you're taking a picture, because they're going to be taking pictures of it. You usually have a placemat. I have a list of do's and don'ts. It's at feedyourfamilytonight.com/TV. And if you are interested in this, go and get that list of do's and don'ts at feedyourfamilytonight.com. Perfect, Jason. Don't use all white plates. I made that mistake for a very long time, because on food photography, all white plates looks great. And when I'm taping from home, I will sometimes use an all white plate, but the lights of the studio are very, very strong, and it will read almost neon and hot, and it causes glare, and the cameramen don't like it. So you want to keep the cameraman happy. So don't use all white plates. Bring in a colored plate, a black plate. The darker, the better. Bring in a dark plate, bring in a dark placemat, something to put the plate on, and you have your finished product. I always ask the talent if they would like to taste on air or if they would prefer not to. Some of them like to eat on air. Some of them are very concerned about having things on their teeth, or they're very careful about their diet and they don't want to eat on air. Ask them if they would like a tasting plate, create one for them. Don't assume that there is anything at the studio. If you do your reconnaissance, you'll see if they have a cooking set. They may not, you might just have a table. And you can make a recipe with just a table, make a salad dressing. I mean, you don't have to have a stove or an oven, but make sure that you have a very simple recipe. Do that. Set up, cooking and mixing, and then tasting. And that's how you are going to be successful with a stupid, simple recipe. Like you have 4 to 7 minutes. That's a typical segment, but you have like 3 minutes of cooking time. By the time you chit chat and you get introduced and they do the tasting, 3 minutes tops. So very, very simple. And have as much prepped ahead as you can, like that trick that I did with the hamburger. I would not bring raw meat in until you have been very seasoned and done it for a long time. If you're doing something like that lemon ramen chicken stir fry that I did, I would have brought in my chicken pre-cooked, and I just would have added the noodles and the broth and the broccoli, because you don't want to mess with raw chicken. Also, it's a cleaning thing. Like, cleaning up after raw chicken is kind of a mess, and there's usually not water. It took me 6 months to figure out we had a microwave, which totally changed my world, because if I was making something baked and I had like melted butter, I would bring it in like a thermos. I would have my melted butter in a thermos. Once I figured out there was a microwave, I was like, oh, changed my life. But so these are the things that you want to, I mean, you're going in to nothing. Don't assume
So basically,
anything.
just pretend that you're going into a warehouse, that you're going to cook in the middle of a warehouse, and you need to bring everything that you would possibly need.
Yes. And here's another little thing. Watch out for induction. You know, a lot of the flat cooktops, if they have a flat cooktop and you can tell it's a flat cooktop, do not assume that it's electric. Take something magnetic, you know, a cast iron or a enameled cast iron or something, because I've been at a place and they're like, it's induction. I was like, okay. So I sent my husband to bring my Le Creuset and it was fine. But just the first time, don't assume anything.
And having a simple recipe, I assume, would help with that as well, that you're not counting on a lot of that.
Exactly.
I would think the first time too, like I've done cooking shows like here, like on Facebook Live and Chibo, stuff like that. And I've taught people in person. So like taught people cooking and talked about while cooking. And I feel like I would be so overwhelmed walking into a TV studio, despite having done that, that I'd be thinking about like, where am I supposed to be looking? How do I talk to the anchor? How does this go on? And then to also have to try to think about a recipe I was making would be so hard, where if it is that stupid, simple recipe, it'd be like, okay, I don't have to think about the recipe because it's brainless. I can now worry about the 1,000 new things that's swirling around me right now.
Absolutely. And ask the anchors, they will help you. Say, what camera am I looking at? Do you want me to look at you? Most of the time, it's more natural for you to look at them when you're answering a question, and that's what they want you to do. But ask them. They will help you. Because they want you to look good. Because when you look good, they look good. And so ask them and they will help you. But absolutely, I teach my private coaching clients about my index card, where I have an index card where I list all of the ingredients. I list all of the utensils that I need, and what I'm putting everything in. If I'm measuring a cup of water, I'm going to say my cup of water is my 1 cup measuring cup, and my 2 cups of chicken broth are in my 2 cup measuring cup. and I write it out step by step. I have, this is step 1 of what I'm cooking. This is step 2 of what I'm cooking. Then we're going to the tasting, or step 3. And I list it out. It's called whiteboarding in the TV world. It's called whiteboarding, where you basically make a script of everything you're going to do. And I tell my private coaching clients to get that index card, walk through it in your head. You might even the first time test that recipe at home. Have someone asking you questions about it while you're cooking and stirring, because it can be really intimidating and it's easy to freeze. So keep it simple and have everything on an index card. You can have that index card on the stove. No one's going to see it. No one's going to care. Sometimes you can even give questions that you want the anchors to ask you on their own index card, and they will ask you that. My anchors, again, I've been with them long enough. I'll say, my goal for today is to sell my holiday planning guide. So will you ask me about the holiday planning guide? They totally will. They want you to look good and they want to help you.
I like your suggestion of cook this recipe with someone asking you questions about it. Because I remember when I first started doing it, it was very much, oh, and yeah, this is what you do. Oh yeah, and then like I could only either talk or I could cook, but I couldn't do both at the same time. I just kind of exchanged one or the other. Like even stirring would throw me off of no longer focusing on, the person taking my class. And it took me a while to get used to doing something with my hands that wasn't connected to what my brain was doing almost.
That's right. And when you are planning, when you're writing that index card, say, as I'm stirring, I just did a curried pumpkin soup. And one thing that I was talking about is how you need to add acid to balance it. And so I put a splash of apple cider vinegar in it. And so I wrote on my index card, I mean, I've been doing this for 2 years and I still have my index card. I wrote on my index card, as I'm stirring, talk about why acid is important to recipes. So you want to plan things that you're going to say while you're doing the activity, and that will help you be much more successful too.
Awesome. You answered this a little bit, but I wanted to make sure we threw it up there. Darren asked, do you usually have to do a full cook or just bring all the food in? How little or how much? You gave a few different examples, but what is it typically if you're going in to expect?
Okay, the first thing is you want to have one completely cooked thing ready to go, and that is your taster. So you have a finished product that you bring, and then depending upon the kind of recipe that you're doing, you're either going to bring it semi-cooked or you're going to start from scratch. But I usually bring everything pre-measured. So I have little baggies. If I'm doing a baking recipe, I will have one baggie with my baking soda, one baggie with my salt, and I will dump that into my clear bowls when I get there. With something like cooking chicken, the meat is already cooked, but I'm adding the other pieces. With something like a baking recipe, let's say I'm doing beer bread today. So let's say I'm making beer bread. I am going to have a finished beer bread, and then I'm going to mix the beer bread and put it into the pan, and then I'm going to say it goes into the oven. But I'm not physically baking it there. I'm going to take it home with me, and I'm going to bake it when I get home. So it depends on the kind of recipe. The key is you have 3 minutes. So what can you do in 3 minutes? And that's how much physical cooking you should have either prepared, already done, or what you're going to be able to accomplish in this segment. But always have one completely finished taster.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. And here's another great question. If you live between major markets or even in the same market, should you approach multiple stations? Is this an exclusive agreement you have with one station? How does this kind of work with multiple TV stations being out there?
Every situation's different. I definitely am not exclusive, and I can go anywhere. And if you live between markets, go with the smaller market first, build some credibility, and then work your way up to the bigger market, because they're watching what the other stations are doing too. So if you get on the smaller market and they're like, oh, she's down there, let's bring her up here, it can totally work to your advantage. So I am not exclusive. If they make you sign something exclusive, this happened. I have a speaking coach, and she was a political analyst in Florida, and she was not exclusive, and then they decided to pay her, and she became exclusive because they were paying her as an analyst. So unless they are paying you or they make you sign something, you are not exclusive at all. And in that industry, there's not a lot of loyalty. I mean, so you are loyal to yourself, and don't forget that. Unless they're paying you.
Yeah, like if they want to be exclusive, they better be offering you something to make that happen. And I love the idea too of starting with the small market, both to kind of show what you have, but I would also think to make some mistakes and figure out what you're doing. So when you do walk into the big place, you know what you're doing and you can crush it, versus that's your first attempt ever cooking on TV and kind of trying to figure out what's going on.
Absolutely, and goodness gracious, I have made so many mistakes. I mean, I've done this again for over 2 years now, and I made plenty of mistakes. But learn from my mistakes. Get that do's and don'ts. Get that that freebie that you put in the chat there, Jason, because that will save you at least 10 cooking segments of fluffing up. And one of my biggest fluff ups was when I tried to do a roast chicken, cook once, eat 3 times. And I was trying to make a quesadilla, and I was trying to make bone broth, and I was trying to make chicken noodle soup, and I was like, I learned my lesson. Keep it simple.
3 minutes to do 18 components in this modernist presentation of chicken soup.
Yeah. So yeah. But so learn from my mistakes. Get those do's and don'ts, and that's going to save you at least 10 segments, I promise.
Awesome. I love hearing all about this. It's amazing. I want to shift gears a little bit. Before I do, you offer consulting on this. You have your download that I posted. So if people are interested in this and they want more, they should check out the Food Blogger Summit that's coming up. And you're speaking next Thursday. Is that right? Next Wednesday?
I think I'm on Thursday.
Awesome. I'll put the link in there. Check that out. See everything Marie has to talk about there. It should be great, and she'll dive into even more of it. But before I let you go, I wanted to talk about your podcast. You also run a podcast, which is something that a lot of bloggers listen to, but a lot don't really think about doing their own. How did you get into starting a podcast?
You know, before I ever had Feed Your Family Tonight, I was a huge podcast listener. I'm very much an auditory learner, and I always dreamt of having a podcast. And after I got into my business for a year or two, I said, it's time. And so I started my podcast. I've been doing public speaking for my business. Again, I focus on meal planning. So I talk to a lot of moms groups and PTOs and that type of thing. And I was saying the same things over and over again. So I decided to start my podcast to put that content out there so that people could hear it in one place. And I've just reached 100 episodes. I'm on episode 103 tomorrow.
Congratulations.
And I love it. And so that's kind of how I got started.
Nice. Darren says, how do you get started? Just jump in and do it.
Darren, I totally agree.
All relate to that.
I totally agree. Podcasting is easier than people think to get started. I mean, you can have a well-crafted, highly produced podcast, but in the world of indie podcasts, you can get decent quality sound, and you can get fun content at a very easy entry level.
How does food, which is an inherently sensory experience, whether it's visual or taste, obviously, how does that translate to something like a podcast that's just talking?
Well, lots of different ways. Again, I will talk about about the emotional burden of feeding your family, and how there's so many decisions that parents are making just trying to get dinner on the table. So I'll talk about that. I'll do a deep dive into equipment, and I'll talk about my favorite equipment, and then I'll link to them all in my Amazon store. I'll do a deep dive into an ingredient. I've got an episode on pumpkin. I've got an episode on lemons, and I'll talk about all the different ways how I use a single ingredient. I don't really put recipes on my podcast. It's not what I do. I don't talk much about recipes. I talk about food in general. I talk about feeding your family. So it's all centered around the same thing, and it's about food, but I'm not physically cooking on my podcast. I'm talking about the issues that my audience is facing day in, day out, trying to get dinner on the table.
I love that. And that's part of you having a really strong niche as well. Your niche isn't quick and easy meals. It's this philosophy of helping stressful families get food out there. And knowing that gives you so much things around the recipes that you can talk about that you don't have to focus on them on something like a podcast.
Exactly. It's about serving my listeners, knowing what is stressing them at that time and helping them find ways to get out of their stress. I mean, in the end, isn't that what we're all doing? We're trying to problem solve for our viewers, and I just do it for my listeners too.
What challenges have you run into trying to host a podcast?
Well, sometimes you get the little brain block where you're like, I feel like I've talked about everything. My biggest tip for that is you can talk about the same things over and over again in different ways. And those are the things that your audience is going to remember. You bring back the same theme over and over again, and you weave it through your podcast, and that's what you're going to get known for. And so that emotional burden of feeding your family is one of my big themes that I try and weave in and out of all my podcasts. So you can say the same thing over and over again, but I tell you, there have been times where I was like, I don't know if I have anything else to say.
One thing that comes up a lot in these interviews is people talking about that concept too of, we understand that you might be talking about this subject for the fourth time, but that's 4 times in 100 podcasts. And the majority of your fans aren't going to have listened to every single one and know your podcast like you do. They might not even realize that you've talked about it in a slightly different way before, and it's completely new to them. And if it's something important to you, I think it will resonate with your new fans that have come on and haven't listened to your entire archive of podcasts. And even your big fans might not care that much because they love hearing about that concept. And that's why they follow you to start with.
Oh my goodness, right? I have a podcaster that I follow, and she's on like episode 300. She says the same thing about every 6 weeks, and I still listen to her. And that's what I have to remember as a podcaster, is that my listeners are the same way. They want to hear me. They want to hear what I have to say. And if I'm saying the same thing over and over again, they don't care. So that's totally true, Jason.
One thing people always ask is, can you monetize a podcast? Do you monetize yours? Do you use yours to expand your brand? What are the goals behind your podcast?
My goal behind my podcast is to expand my brand and create credibility and stability. Monetizing a podcast is very challenging. And it takes, to get onto some of the ad networks, you've got to be at 20 to 50,000 downloads per episode, which is a lot. And then you're not necessarily choosing the ads, and you want to make sure that they go with your thing. My podcast is about making a personal connection with my fans, because when you are in their ears, you become a part of their routine. They listen to you when they walk their dogs on Friday mornings, or they listen to you when they're making pancakes on Saturday mornings, and you become a part of their rhythm and their routine, and they know you and they trust you. And then you can monetize it by selling your cookbook or selling my planners that I have there. I don't really sell on my podcast, and I don't monetize my podcast. My podcast is about connecting with my people.
I love that concept. And I think that's a lot of people, the end goal of a lot of food bloggers is to make money.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we're doing a lot of it, but not every tactic that we use to get to that end goal has to be about making money itself. And doing things like going on TV to expand your brand, having a podcast to let them get to know you better, and like you're saying, to be that kind of consistent voice that they get used to hearing. All those things further that goal without directly bringing in any income, but can be a great way to expand your brand over time.
100%. Podcasting is a long game. If you start and you only have a few listeners each time, know that podcasting is a long game. And I love it. It is the business I choose. But know that it's not a fast track to anything. It's going to take a lot of episodes, and it's going to take a lot of diligent work for a long time to have it pay off.
Like a lot of things in blogging, it's not going to work overnight, but if you stick at it and keep putting in the hard work, you'll keep growing and keep growing over time, and it will eventually turn into something amazing.
I totally agree.
Well, I appreciate you coming on so much. You shared so much expertise and just so much great tips and knowledge for everyone. I learned a ton. I'm sure everyone else did. And if they want more of you, they can check you out. Let me grab your website and post that in at feedyourfamilytonight.com.
Yeah.
And you will be at the Food Blogger Summit next week, doing the podcast panel and doing your own presentation on diving into even more about presenting on TV. Marie, I appreciate you so much coming on and sharing your knowledge.
Oh, Jason, the pleasure was mine. This was so much fun. And again, if they want that free download of the do's and don'ts of cooking on local TV, feedyourfamilytonight.com/TV. Again, keep it stupid simple, right? So /TV.
Well, I really appreciate that. And everyone can remember, you can join us live every Thursday when we record these episodes. You can ask the guest questions. A lot of people were asking questions today, which was great. You can talk to the other bloggers in the comments, and you can see our smiling faces, which you can't see on the podcast. So join us Thursdays at makethatbacon.com/live. And until next time, I'm Jason Logston. See y'all next Thursday.